morning, everybody. I think we'll get started. So welcome to our Leveraging Your Data event. We've got brilliant panelists for you today. We've got Jonathan Bray, our Deputy Head of Digital at the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. We've got Patrick Murray, our Head of Data, AI and Analytics at Razor. We've got Jamie Hinton, our co-founder of Razor, Tom Helliwell, one of our data experts at Razor, and I'm Catherine. Nice to see you all, meet you all. I know you're all out there somewhere, and I'm our account director at Razor. So just a few housekeepings from me. I won't take up much of your time before we get into the good stuff. Today's session is going to be recorded, and you will receive an email with that recording following today's event, so don't worry about that. Just to give you a quick overview of the agenda, we are kicking off with Jonathan, who's telling us all about manufacturing in the digital age. That's going to be followed by an introduction to data and how to get started with Patrick. We've then got Jamie, who will be telling us how data is transforming manufacturing with one of our client case studies, followed by a brilliant practical demonstration on getting started with data by Tom. And then we'll be closing out today's session with myself explaining how you can book a data exploration consultation with us and what to expect in that. And finally finishing with some Q&A. Just in terms of the Q&A, you should all have access to a Q&A panel. Please feel free throughout the event to submit questions. What we'll do is we will keep them monitored and we will come to them and address them at the Q&A section at the end of the agenda. So without further ado, I'll get us started on the good stuff. I'll hand over to Jonathan.
So good morning and a big welcome from Razor and the AMRC. My name is Jonathan Bray, Deputy Head of Digital, and I'm glad you've all registered to attend today's event. So I'm not here to go on about how data is the new oil and where IoT is the pipeline and the tech companies are the digital refineries and how important blockchain is to secure those data transactions, even if this just was, if the big data was the catalyst for the Tesco club card. The emphasis for today's event is on manufacturing and how you can gain insight from the data that is all around you within your facility. But let's not only think that data is what we're talking about is coming off a machine to an operator, letting them know the parameters of go or no go. Let's think about how the simple collection of data from a single machine can have a knock-on effect throughout the business. So my example is connecting the shop floor to the top floor in, let's say, in near real time. I don't think there's anything such as real time. Something we all want but don't do. So data capture can not only alert all stakeholders in the process of any relevant issues, but also there's hidden issues that are not glaringly obvious to you. How can this support procurement, HR, training, and never mind the obvious of quality operations and maintenance? It's about it's all about getting the structure of the data correct from the start, and everything else then from there will just happen as coincidence for you. But what is big data and how did we jump from small data to big data? Well, big data is a field that treats ways to analyze, systematically extract information from or otherwise deal with data sets that are too large or complex to be dealt with by a traditional data processing application software. So big data is the ability to analyze meaningful and relevant data and convert data to information, knowledge, and ultimately action. And this is where the AMRC and Razor can help to support your business. So you'll see through this morning's session how understanding what your data structure looks like and the connectivity of options that you have to help you know how important the V in data is in your business. And if you're not aware that there is a V in data, then these are the V's. Volume, velocity, variety, variability, veracity, vulnerability, volatility, visualization, and value. So they are now what are seen to be the 10 V's of big data. And from you understanding what these look like in your business, it can go a long way to plan your journey into the world of data and analytics for manufacturing. And it's from this is where we like to sort of understand what your processes can actually do, how you can actually monitor, as I said, how can all this data and the use of this data actually assist you from knowing that one operator is doing one task very well on a machine and another operator is not doing it so well on the other machine. Well, why is that? Has one operator had the training over another operator? And then you want to look at the data and say, well, why did that operator have that better training than the other operator? Were they off on, were they sick? Are they a new start? Have they had the right coaching and the mentoring and the training to help them on the machine? Is it then looking at the processes of the machine? So there's a lot there that you can really understand from looking at the simple data that comes off within your business and off those machines to really help you get a real holistic view of how your business is behaving. One real is the veracity, the trust of your data. I've been to businesses where they've started to work in a sort of a data-driven mentality to what they're doing, but they still go back to their spreadsheets and looking and still doing it the old ways because they don't have the trust in the data. And I think as we start to go on and as we start to develop more and have more systems that we can actually have that trust in the data, know where the data is coming from, and actually test it and see what we're getting out of it, then that's where we will start to be able to develop better processes and learn to become more efficient and also then to be more productive. And I think as you start to go on then through the next couple of sessions, you'll see how Razor are actually working now with manufacturers to actually help them to understand, to actually help them open their eyes to see what data they've got, come into their businesses with a fresh pair of eyes and give them that sort of that new light bulb moment of how they can start to do things new and become more competitive within their business.
What data trends and problems are manufacturers bringing to the AMRC on a daily basis?
I think for us, it really does start off with looking at what they want to get out of their data. What is it they really want? And the big piece everyone's talking about is looking at predictive maintenance. You know, looking at what your machine is actually doing, and then understanding then where you can go from pulling the data off that machine as well, and to understand where down the line are you facing problems. So if the machine is actually running, and for example, one simple example that we have is we monitor, and a cheap way of doing this is to monitor current and the current draw of the machine. So then from looking at that if you're constantly making the same components, and you should be getting the same profile all the time. So therefore, if that changes, can you then monitor, find out when that change happened, look at the batch number, and see what happened in that process to see what.
And that's a common thing across different manufacturers making lots of different things.
A lot of manufacturers really want to start looking at where they can sort of improve the machining processing time, especially how they can make things, you know, not just more efficiently, but also, you know, ensure that the quality and also then the tooling that they use as well, the consumables, how are you monitoring the use of your consumables, so that you can actually you can say that they're doing what it says on the side of the tin as such.
So they're getting a return on their investment.
They get the ROI back on it, yes, as well then.
So why do you think manufacturing is the ideal industry to start leveraging data?
I think really we've been looking at, you know, you could say that the financial industry has been looking at using big data for a long time now. And I think as we start moving into the industry, you know, into Industry 4, and start being able to have the understanding that there's data all around us within our factories, that manufacturing really now needs to start to use that to make itself, as I said before, more efficient, more productive, and globally more, and in the UK, more competitive as well. To other.
So there's a huge amount of data and it's not being used yet.
It's there, but again, it's where and how you pull it off. You know, the AMRC has got 2 spin-outs, and that is what one of the main drivers is, to be able to pull data off machines to help businesses understand, you know, what's happening, and understand, especially if they're getting quality issues, if they're getting tool life issues, if they're getting maintenance problems with a machine, are they understanding why a machine is constantly going down, when a machine goes down, and again, looking back to the maintenance side of things, understanding if a machine ready to go, when is the machine about to go down, and then how that can also then relate back to even how you deal with the contracts of your business, and do you buy a machine, or do you rent the machine? Do you lease the maintenance leasing of it? Who's involved? You know, how much do you keep on site? Do you keep, if you're talking about machining, do you have how many parts do you have to own to keep on site and buy initially?
It's efficiency and it's making informed decisions.
Being able to make those decisions, but actually then have systems to lead forward, to have systems make the decisions for you.
Yeah.
So then everything can just start to sort of keep running. So you don't have to have downtimes. You don't stop because things are broke.
Yeah.
You know, you preempt. The system data can preempt the things that don't stop.
That's great. Thank you, John. So, Patrick, are you ready to take us through some of the nitty-gritty of this, please?
So, every business is a data business. It doesn't matter the industry, it doesn't matter the size, it doesn't matter how long it's been around. Data is going to flow through every single operation, and that's whether you're collecting it and whether you're making use of it or whether you're not. Now, data analytics and even AI has moved beyond those early adopters, and it's become this real competitive advantage for those companies who actually make use of it. Now, before I joined Razor as head of data analytics and AI, I was a nuclear design engineer, so I really understand how important it is to have that right information on hand when big decisions matter. But at the same time, how difficult it can be to get it there, but it can also be difficult to trust it even when it is there. Now, that sounds like quite a big career change, but it's a really good fit for me because I love solving these big problems, and data transformation can feel like a really big problem. But does it have to feel that big? I want to talk to you a bit today about how that data journey can start with quite a small step, but at the same time, it can deliver value and we can avoid that disillusionment that sets in whenever a big transformation project takes place. Well, first of all, why now? Now, something that I hear a lot when I talk about data and AI is that we've been here several times before. It's touted as the next big thing that's going to solve all our problems, but then it fades away back into obscurity without really delivering on all the lofty promises that came along with it. Now, I was asked recently what I thought the most exciting next upcoming thing with data and AI is. And I think the person who was asking me was hoping that I'd start waxing lyrical about neural networks, or that I have an AI that can predict that England are going to win 3-1 tonight. But for me, it's about how accessible this technology is, because not only is data everywhere now, but we can interrogate it. We have this abundance of open source tools and frameworks, all of which is built upon generation after generation of more and more powerful and accessible computing and storage. And it's that democratization of computing that I find really exciting, because it underpins why data and AI is here to stay. Things like cloud computing now give organizations of all shapes and sizes access to this technology that previously was just reserved for these big technology enterprises. And it's not just about pushing the boundaries to the next big invention. It's now about bringing everyone else along, and that's what's really exciting. But you might be sat there, you might be thinking about your data. It's distributed across a number of systems. You might be thinking about that pile of paper documents that it's all stuck in, or it's hidden away in an Excel spreadsheet that someone has kept on their desktop. And getting more value from that data feels like a really long way away. And to be honest, it might be, but that's okay, because data transformation can't happen overnight, but it doesn't necessarily need to. We do need to start somewhere. And one of the great things about data is this inherent scalability of the solutions we can build. You can't do very much with half a nuclear power plant, but you can start deriving quite a bit of value from just a small part of a wider data strategy. But that leads me to my next point, because if the building blocks are there and the technology's there, what is it that derails a lot of these projects? And one of the big factors is what's known as the trough of disillusionment. Now, this is that stage of a transformation project where the initial enthusiasm has started to wear off. And it's that moment where you sat around a table with your CEO and you're explaining to them that, no, really, this new database is exactly what's going to change everything. But when it comes to actually demonstrating that tangible value, it's just not there yet. And it's that moment the project starts to stutter, and then eventually it grinds to a halt because it needs some more money, or the next interesting projects come along and everyone changes their focus. Now, one of the core reasons for this is that data is really overrated. Now, this is coming from someone with data in his job title and whose boss is about to do a talk immediately after this. But unless you can turn data into insight, it's just an overhead. and it's an overhead you have to pay to store. It's an overhead you need to pay someone to look after and maintain. So it's not very surprising when people just don't bother and it's neglected. On top of that, even if you turn it into insight, if you don't take action on that insight, it's just more noise, and the world's already probably noisy enough. So how do we get to actionable insight? Now, this is where I want to introduce the concept of the DIKW pyramid. Now, this illustrates how our wisdom to make decisions is built upon the knowledge that we have. That knowledge we derive from the information we have available to us. Now, underpinning all of this is data, but if we were to take an everyday example of data, red light. Now, on its own, that's completely meaningless, and there's not a single conclusion that we can draw from that. We need to add some meaning to turn that into information. The westbound traffic light on Sydney Street is red. Now we're starting to understand what the red light means, which is very nice, but so what? We turn this into knowledge by adding that context. I'm driving westbound on Sydney Street and the traffic lights turn red. That bit of context has turned that meaningless data point into something that we understand about our own situation, and that finally we can turn into action. I better put the brakes on. Now, what I find the most reliable thing about this pyramid is that there isn't any traffic light on Sydney Street, which might feel familiar as well. But what I'm trying to show is the fundamental goal of any data transformation is to move through these levels. And that's about applying the right technology and the right processes. It's about adding that context and the meaning using by transforming and enriching that data, but also making it available to the right people at the right time. It's also a big part to ensure that it's not siloed from other bits of data that can offer it that context. Now, one issue with this structure is that it implies that all of the data has to come before anything else. Now, my background's not in civil engineering, but I know you wouldn't build the foundation without, you build the foundation before you build the rest of the structure. Now, this is where organizations get stuck and they start to fall into that trough. They try and do everything on this data layer and get it all perfect. But the problem is that when you build this data foundation first, this is where you lack the tangible value that you or anyone else that you work with are going to feel. This is where all that momentum starts to stop because there's no impact quickly, and so everyone's behaviour just stays the same and we all just carry on as we did before. At this stage, we know we have lots of lights, but we don't really understand whether they mean stop or go or whether we need to change direction entirely. So where do we start if not from the foundation? And the answer is simple, and it's start small. You want to find that small data opportunity, but see it through all the way from the bottom to the top. What's that one small signal that you can take and you can turn that into an actionable insight that you can use right now? Because this gives real benefit. It demonstrates what technology you're going to use. It starts to show the right stakeholders the art of the possible. But most importantly, for somebody, it makes data part of the day-to-day, and that's what makes people start to treat data better. But obviously choosing that slice isn't easy. In the beginning, all of your focus should be on how do we empower people to make better decisions? Because how often do you find you're making a decision, but you don't have this complete view of what the world actually looks like? So think about those key decisions, because that's where action happens. If your data was a person who was stood in the room with you, what questions would you be asking them? Now, again, at this stage, it's really easy to get bogged down and dig straight into, well, what data do we have? But by starting at the top of that pyramid with a question, you can focus your effort. You can focus your effort on the data that is important to you, and you minimize data for data's sake. Choose something that's high impact, but you know it's manageable and it's something you can deliver end to end. As I said before, data tools and pipelines are very scalable. So delivering that one small but complete part of the platform gives you a really firm foundation to then build off and start adding different things. Also, framing the challenge as a question up front, it gives you that first indication of, do you have the data to do this in the first place? You might decide you want to pursue something different, or you can start thinking about, well, how do we start collecting it? For example, you might want to ask, where are the bottlenecks in our production line? So that tells you to focus on, do we have the right machine utilization data? Can we start collecting that? But at this stage, I'd encourage you to think beyond what are the traditional Industry 4.0 questions. For example, you might want to think about which of our suppliers is the most reliable. But do you have the data on your supply chain? do you know what reliable means to you? And is that the same thing it means to your colleagues? But once that first step's been taken and you start to see the results, at that point you start to scale. You look at how data flows through the organization because that represents your unique view of the world. The most powerful insights are often derived from how we combine different data streams and how do we empower people to explore them themselves, but also ask their own questions. Because it is people that are at the heart of all these processes. We talk a lot about automation and AI, which is all very important, but it's about putting this stuff in people's hands and empowering them to be better at the stuff they're doing today, because everything else can come later. Now, moving through those layers and getting that wisdom in the right hands is both a process and a technology problem. And I know we love talking about this stuff at Razor. Catherine says before, she's going to talk to you a little bit about how we can get together for a chat, because if you've got something in mind or you just don't know where to start with this, let's get together for a chat and we can start pointing you in the right direction. But if you do take one thing away from this, go away and find what is that one slice and ask yourself, what is that question you would ask? Assess, do you have the data to do it now, or how can you go about getting it? And then start to plot the path through that pyramid to get that wisdom in people's hands. And finally, if that prediction about England comes off, please share that clip, because I guarantee nobody else has made that prediction and it will make me look great. But yeah, I'm going to pass you over to Jamie. He's going to talk to you a little bit more about why this stuff is so important and how we put this stuff into the wild at Razor.
So I hope you've enjoyed what Patrick's been telling you about, and what I want to do now is build on what Patrick was describing there and tell you some, I suppose, little stories that might inspire you to think maybe a little bit differently. And these are really in line with that thin slice that Patrick was highlighting, because we see that all too often. So I'd like to pose a question. The question is this. So I suppose it's not a question, it's more of a statement. The enterprise that does not innovate ages and declines. And in a period of rapid change, such as the present, the decline will be fast. And this is a statement made by a chap called Peter Drucker. And I'm pretty sure he's just amalgamated a lot of wisdom to come up with this short statement. And he said this in 2014. And I'm pretty sure that this is more relevant today than it was even in 2014. And it's only going to become even more relevant. And the only thing that we know about the future is that it will be different. Again, another great term by Peter Drucker. I'm pretty sure he's actually stolen that from someone else, but it's still incredibly relevant today. So to help us think about this and to put this in context, I'd like you to think about your organisation 10 years from now. Start projecting all those sci-fi films you love to watch, say like Tony Stark and what he's doing in those films and what was happening. Even when those films were produced years ago. But try and imagine your business and organisation 10 years from now. And I know that's really hard because none of us are really digital prophets. Now, sometimes it's easy to think backwards. So what technology were you using in 2011? What were the cars you were driving? What was brand new in 2011? What was the technology you were using? How fast was your internet at home? What was your mobile connectivity and latency like? If you just think back to 2011, it's actually incredible where we were and what the difference is now. Now, 2011 wasn't actually that interesting, but 2009, that was a pretty amazing year. It was actually in 2011 that Steve Jobs died, and that doesn't feel like long ago. And the other interesting thing in 2011 was that Siri was launched and properly productionized. I haven't really met anyone yet who thinks Siri is really good, and they definitely didn't think it was good in 2011. However, think about it now. Think about those voice interfaces that we all use. I'm not going to say the A word or the OK, because it might set people's devices off, but we use those a lot, and they're really very, very good. And that's in a short space of time, how good they've got. I want you to think about that and where we're going, and that makes you start thinking quite creatively of what should we be doing now. So the point is, a lot has actually changed. A hell of a lot has changed in that time. I think if you go back to year 2000 and go to 2010, An incredible amount has changed. And then 2010 to 2020, even more has changed. And this is the point. A lot more is going to change. So coming back to what Jonathan was saying about what's happening with manufacturing, what they're coming towards, it's almost like now is the time to do something. A hell of a lot of change in so many sectors. A lot needs to change and get moving fast. So another great phrase by my good old friend Peter Drucker: the best way to predict the future is to create it. And what you do today dictates your future. The decisions you make, the actions you take. If I started to run more today, my future would be very different. I would be healthier, I'd be better, I'd be a faster runner. And that's the point. What you do now, don't underestimate the decisions, and what you choose to do now is going to impact on your future. So I would like to tell you a story. These are different stories. I'm not talking about some reports or dashboards, and I also want to caveat this in that they aren't perfect, and that's okay. So once upon a time there was a manufacturer, and we can't tell you who they are, as that is classified information, and we can't tell you all the details, as that is also classified information. But we can tell you something. So here we go. I'm going to tell you a story around automating a difficult task. Now, the organisation had done that process of understanding that value chain, that value stream mapping, and understood in their process there was a problem, and this problem was the one that originated many other problems. So they'd left shifted and understood that. They then understood that it's a very, very difficult task, and historically they wouldn't have been able to touch this problem. It revolved around a lot of human interaction, a lot of decision making, a lot of human understanding, I suppose. However, they came to us to go, is this possible? This is that very thin slice. They'd understood the question they wanted to ask, which was great, and that was due to us asking them very pertinent questions. And what we did was we conducted what we call a sprint. This is where it can be akin to like a tracer bullet. If you only had 5 cannons to shoot, you wouldn't just go and shoot one to try and sink your enemy. You'd find where to aim it first, and you'd use tracer bullets, and you'd fire them and fire them and find it, and then you'd fire your cannon. And that's what we were doing. We created a structure where we would sprint and understand, is this possible? And the problem was this. This business is a global organisation, and a lot of the time they're selling commodity items. They manufacture commodity items. And the biggest problem they were having was purchase orders. The customers that they were selling to would send them a purchase order. And this would come from SAP. It would be scrawled, written down on a piece of paper. It would be an Excel. It would just be an email. It would be a fax. Yeah, they still use faxes, and I'm pretty sure that happens more than we think. But to us, it's like, a fax? I'm asking my child, have you seen a fax before? No, I've never heard of one of those. And their big problem was the difference of these types of purchase orders. And not only that, the way that they would describe was different. Someone would describe a part very differently. I would call it a jibble flop, and they would call it a flibble flop. But a human would understand that. They'd also dictate the sizes, the scale of these things. One would say it's a flingle flangle. I can't tell you the exact details because that would give away. And one other person would call it a jibble flop. So we had lots and lots of different problems here. So what we did is we looked and experimented. How can we do this? What can we do? What commodity products can we use? So the cloud, for example, they are commodity items we can just use and leverage. And I know sometimes that's a real problem with manufacturers of sending data out off-premise and all that sort of stuff. I get that. But the purpose here is to experiment what's possible, and then you can bring it in-house and understand, do we invest in it? So what we did was we understood, can we use that? Can we use computer vision? Can we use OCR? Can we use Levenstein matching? Can we use natural language processing to understand elements? And what we did was we used applied science, and we went really quickly, we threw this thing together. It's sticky back plastic, it's tie wraps, that's what we did. And we proved that actually we could understand a certain set of those purchase orders. Not all of them, granted, but we could understand some, and that's the key. What was really interesting from this experiment is because we asked loads of ignorant questions, we were able to get down and understand another challenge they have. So on purchase orders, for example, they have a lot of terms and conditions, and these terms might have specific things in: you can't deliver it by a certain time, or you must ensure that a lorry isn't this big, or whatever that is. And a human being is notoriously bad at reading terms and conditions. How many of you have actually, before you've gone, I agree, read all of them? Not very many people. And that's what's happening with these purchase orders. Someone might have done it in the first place just to actually negotiate, but if they change, they could be in deep doo-doo. So what we did was we added to this process the ability to understand that text, and every subsequent purchase order came in, match against it, what has changed. And all it did was highlight that there was a change to someone to actually go and review it. Now, it's not making the decision, it's handing it to a human being to go, there is something different. What should we do? Is it okay? And what should we do about it? What's the task? And that's really interesting. Now, this, I suppose, traceable, this sprint turned into then a real life project. And we delivered, we invested in building out the machine learning models. And it processed. It could do about 10% of the purchase orders. But there was a human interface that allowed, when it couldn't work something out, for a human being to teach it, so it got better and better. And this is an investment over time. This is that very thin slice that gets buy-in. This reduces the load of human beings and that cognitive load. And what the purpose is that it might be 1% better each month, each year, but it might get to 80%, and that's a significant impact. And that's doing something now that's going to pay off in the future and continue to pay off. Another interesting story I'd like to tell you about is one that we actually did with the AMRC together. We joined forces, and this is something that we're doing more often. Now, we take the incredible research that the AMRC does, and we help turn it into something that's commercial, something that's shop floor ready. And this for us is exponentially brilliant. This is the synergistic approach. We go to the MRC and go, that is so cool, you guys are so smart, how on earth have you worked that out? And they go, yeah, but what you do is amazing and we can't do what you do. How do you make that thing bulletproof and work? And that's where the synergies come together. We worked with an aerospace manufacturer to create something that was previously impossible to do, something that involved a lot of human interactions. Human beings were processing and making decisions. And together, again, I can't tell you the details, I really want to, and I can't wait for them to be able to allow us to tell you this in a bit more detail. And the output of it was the first full-on, from research not possible to going to the shop floor. We're not quite there yet, but it's coming. And it was such an incredible, I suppose, experience of where you bring these two bits together, the commercial and the research. And if you have anything that's going on with the AMRC, or you've got a really challenging problem you think is impossible, speak with the AMRC, and maybe we'd actually get the opportunity to work together and make it a reality and make something incredible. So what can we learn from these stories, and what should we be doing? What we see as a common element across all of these things is we have to understand the human element. The one about purchase orders, we're talking about humans. We're talking about changing what they do. The project with the AMRC, again, that's got human beings involved in it. Every bit of this, we've got to understand, we've got to have empathy for the people. Now, I've done keynotes at AI Tech North, and we stood up there and we've gone, the technology's great, that happens and that's coming. Don't forget about people. If you don't get the people bit right, all of this fails. This aligns with what Patrick was saying about that thin slice. If we just do all of this bit down here, we lose the momentum, we lose the buy-in, we lose the hearts and minds. And this is the thing, we've got to deliver something that actually people can get hold of and they want to run with. And we've got to get the buy-in and get the hearts and minds. And that's what we should be doing. We should be doing those thin slices and delivering value and getting the hearts and minds of people. So, a thought or three to ponder. There is no such thing as certainty until something is done. Expect this not to be perfect. People expect us to go, well, you said you'll make it work and it will just work. We've said we'll find something and we'll have a go so we learn. Expect sometimes to get it wrong, and that's okay. Let's not have blame, but think about that. It's only impossible until someone goes and does it. It was impossible to fly. It was impossible to do that project we did with the AMRC. We went and did it. And it's having the courage to go and do that. And do something. Move forward, learn, and be the creators of the future. So it's been ace, and thanks ever so much for listening. And now for something really properly exciting, I'd like to hand over to Tom, who's going to take you through some real practical information and demos of what's possible. And we can't wait to hear from you. So over to Tom, and thank you very much.
And thanks to everyone for joining us today. These guys have just been up. Patrick, Jonathan, and Jamie have given a great introduction to what we're going to show here. So in this section, I just want to cover first a little bit of context into, how can a manufacturing company approach dipping their toe into Industry 4 in a more general way. And the first statement I think I want to make is that there is more to manufacturing than just manufacturing. And what I mean by that is that, the Industry 4 aspects have really focused on the operational stuff, and it's all been about manufacturing. But we've got to understand that to be a digital organisation today is to get on board with data and information and manage the complexity that we have in today's organisations. And this is only going to get more and more complicated, and there's going to be more and more demands on our time and on our productivity. So these are things that we need to think about, and actually, how do we go about it? This is a complex system. How do we work our way through this? How do we improve the communication? So one of the ways that we're suggesting is to get the first step to be visibility. It's about putting a number to the way that your company works, the way the organisation works, the way the factory work. Put a number to these things and be able to measure them and to be able to understand how they stand in relation to one another. That's really what it's about. So if you think about today's organisation, we have a lot of departments, a lot of different business functions, from the very smallest organisation to the very largest. Each one could be just a piece of software. Some of them may be one person, some of them may be entire departments. A lot of the time, these functions are working perfectly fine, and you do not want to go in there and try and change the way they work, because what you'll find is that this can kill digital transformation dead. So one of the things that we're suggesting is a really good way of dipping your toe into a digital project and moving forward towards making use of your data is to bring it all together in what we call a data warehouse. And a data warehouse is one of the offerings that we have now in cloud computing that really help bring all these things together. And once you've got these things together in a nice structured way, you can actually offer this data back to those departments for them to self-serve and understand themselves a little bit better. Or perhaps you might have a business intelligence function that might want to look at the insights between each of these functions as well. So there's multiple opportunities here, and I think I'm going to go into now the Power BI section and show you how all this sort of stuff will work in practice. Right, so you'll firstly notice I'm going straight into my browser. So this is something that we've got very used to, using web-based interfaces to conduct our work, Google Documents, things like that. And this is the sort of thing we can do now. We can actually bring all that information together, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, whether you're on site, whether you're not on site, which has obviously become a big thing now with COVID. You can actually just review your data, you can access it, you can share it with one another. It's not as if it's stuck in someone's computer anymore. So on this first slide, we've created a fake company, shall we say, Razor Robotics, and we've got some revenue information on here. We've got some KPIs to do with the manufacturing. This is the sort of thing that you might have in some senior management office. It's the sort of thing you can take a glance of and you can get a great snapshot and understand how the company operates. And then we can go into different aspects of the functions. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a delay. So when you have a Power BI report, what's actually happening is it's building this as you use it. So it sits somewhere between an application and a data visualization. So actually you can go in here and you can actually click different things and split the data up and start to look at how different things relate to one another. So if I've clicked here, I've looked at Sheffield. What are the customers that I've got in Sheffield? They've got a list, I've got a table, I know when they were happening. I've got a slider, I can break it down into different times of the year. So this is the sort of insights we can get just from, you know, like a CRM system, things like that. This is the sort of information we've got. We've got a nice little map there, so we can look at where the customers are coming from. So if I go on to the next slide, next dashboard report. This one's about suppliers, so it's a similar concept here. We've got our suppliers down here, and we can break them down. We can look at non-conformances. We can look at different periods of time, see how it breaks it down. Again, all of this can be done very easily, and you can make it attractive to fit with your brand of your company, so you can share it internally or externally. On the next slide, what do we have? We have, this one's a very good one. It's very close to my heart. This one's trying to represent a manufacturing system. So what we've got is 3 different parts going through a system first, and then we assemble them later on. So actually what we're showing here is the queuing sizes in September 2020. If I click on October, it'll change. If you're wondering why it's a decimal point, it's because it's taking the average of October. So this type of information is absolutely a goldmine for people who are looking at trying to improve their manufacturing system. If you've got a queue in the same place in your process all the time, it just means that it's really a bottleneck, and it's something that you want to look at. But this is a great way of visualizing that. And I think one of the things that I want to get across is that Power BI is a great way of bringing all this information together. You don't need to have a special app to do this sort of thing. You can get a lot of functionality just by using Power BI and a little bit of effort to bringing that data in. Another one here is just showing the different raw part volumes. So we can see that we've got conditional formatting on the table here. We can see, oh, you know, it's getting a bit low in May 2020, and then it's a little bit too high at the end of March, things like that. And we can break it down by time. So it's a great way of visualizing this kind of data. If you're interested in the supply chain, you wanted to manage your warehouse better, things like that. So it's just food for thought. Further still, as Jonathan Bray's covered earlier, and as Patrick had as well, this is, you know, utilization of factories has been a really big, interesting part of Industry 4. Getting connected has enabled a lot of manufacturers to get a lot more visibility as to how their factories operating on a day-to-day basis and historically. The historical data is one that really drives the improvements, but the day-to-day are the sort of things that drive the operational decisions. Do we need more staff on? Do we need to adjust a certain process? Do we route the part to a different machine? All these types of things, you need the data. You need to be able to visualize what is going on. It's very important to have this sort of information today, because it really is quite easy now to get engaged with this type of work. We can break it down into more smaller time periods. So if you look at, say, inspection, you can see where it's been in use. CNC machining, again, you can start to look at this sort of breakdown on a day-to-day basis, a little bit more granular. As a final slide on this report is just a little bit of a show of how we can bring this information together. We can change the time in which we can look at the data and see what's going on historically. Is there a relationship between the factory utilization and the work in progress? We can get that information and show it quite easily. And the final report I'd like to show everyone is something that's another thing that comes up in to do with Industry 4 very regularly, is the idea of real time. So real time stuff has been a really interesting part of Industry 4, and I think we're always thinking that it has to be using a web application that's been made bespoke. With the Power BI now, you can actually get updates of about 5 seconds, and you can break down the data and start to look at that sort of more granular data. So if I filter this now, so let's look at the last 3 or 4 hours. If I change that to 9 AM, should be able to filter this. Press filter, and again, there you go. So you see the last few hours, we can see when the machine's been off, when it's not been off, and actually we can have a look at where it is over that time period on a little data visualization. So I think that's all I'd like to cover today, and I hope you've enjoyed that. I think hopefully it's given you a few little ideas as to what sort of things you may want to look at in your organisation. So please get in touch. Please record any questions you've got. Please get in touch with us. We'd love to help you out. So I'm going to pass you over now to Catherine, and thanks for listening.
Hello again, everybody. So I'm going to talk you through how to book your data exploration consultation with us. I won't read you obviously what's there on the slide that you can see, and that does explain it for you. But what will happen is you're going to receive an email after the event with instructions on how to book the session. You're going to be given a questionnaire to complete within that email. Once you've completed that questionnaire and you've sent that back over to us, we'll get you booked in for a session. I will send you over some availability and you'll get booked in with one of our data experts. Just to tell you a little bit about that session, it is a great opportunity for us and yourselves to ask a lot deeper questions. It's a real good opportunity to think outside the box and work collaboratively with us. You'll bring your manufacturing industry knowledge, we'll bring our data brains to it, and together we can come up with something that's really going to work for you. We like to use that session as well to challenge ways of thinking, so show you things that you may not have considered before, and vice versa, challenge our way of thinking. You're the manufacturing experts at the end of the day, so we need your industry expertise to be able to find and discover and bring and build for you what's going to be the best data solution to get you where you want to be. We do want you to succeed. We are big on making our clients a massive success. So because of that, there is absolutely no investment required for this consultation. We just, obviously you get it as part of coming along to today's event. There is going to be a little bit of limited availability. It's going to be a bit of a first come, first serve. So if you wanted to get it booked in relatively soon with us after this event, it is on that first come, first serve basis. So yeah, get your questionnaires completed and get those sent back over to us, and we will get you booked in, and I promise you it'll be a really good session with us. And I think on that, just having a look at where we are time-wise, we have had a question or two come through. What I think we'll do is we'll ask one of them, I think, just to fit into the time, and then any other questions that are coming through, or if you have any at the event, please do get in touch with us and we will make sure that we answer them all for you. So one of the questions that did come through, I think, is probably going to be relevant to yourself, Patrick, because you mentioned data solutions that can be scalable. The query around that was, what did you mean by that? Can you elaborate a little bit on that scalability?
Yeah, sure. So as I say, I've spent quite a bit of my career in the engineering world, and I've come across a lot of software tools that are these big monolithic single things that you buy, and then you get locked into them. You end up kind of accruing them and sort of sticking bits of them together, and what you end up is locked into a solution. Now, one of the benefits of a lot of the tools we use around data, which is we always focus on being solution agnostic. Basically, we can start with a small database and use methods of say bringing data into that, and then we can scale up as we need it. As I said before, there's a lot of really useful open source tools out there to get in and analyze that kind of data, and also technology around things like parallel processing. If as that data becomes bigger and bigger, we can provision more compute power. Again, one of the benefits of having this stuff on the cloud is that it's not about buying in a new server or a new computer if we want to decide we want to do more complex analysis. It's about scaling up and doing that kind of thing. So another thing as well is around the how we do data pipelines as well. We find that first step, we talked about taking that first step and focusing on one thing. You can develop and design, say, a data pump to bring that data in from a certain place and do your transformations. But once you have that platform in place, you can use that same foundation then to say, well, we're getting understanding out of this, but if we combine it with this data source and bring them both together into the same environment and then give people that access, that's when we can start to achieve things like what Tom was showing, and bringing everything into one platform and then feeding it back to the different users, and get away from that idea of, because I'm on the shop floor, I should only see shop floor data. You know, start to bring those different bits in, and yeah, enrich the data that way.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Patrick. So rather than trying to rush through some of the other questions that we've got, because I appreciate we're slightly almost running out of time now for today's event, we will share those around with you all and write the answers up for them. And again, like I said, if you've got any other questions, please send them through to us. But thank you all for coming along today. I hope you've learned so much about data, where you are on your journey and where you want to be. Do get in touch with us for that data exploration consultation, and we'll have loads of fun. Thanks for coming, and hopefully I will see you all soon.